Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're heading to Greece, but we're not going to be talking about the sunny beaches or the ancient ruins this time.
Right?
We're going to be looking at something a lot of people might not even realize is such a problem. Greece's shrinking population.
Yeah, it's a big one, and it's been going on for a while now. I mean, over the last decade, the population's already shrunk by 3%, and it could lose another quarter by 2050.
A quarter, that's huge. I mean, what happens when a country starts to empty out like that? Is it just a slow fade? Or are there like these dramatic tipping points? I mean, I have so many questions about how this all works.
Yeah, it's a super complex situation for sure. It's interesting how we often focus on overpopulation as this big global challenge,
Right?
but population decline can be just as disruptive, especially somewhere like Greece.
Yeah, for sure. So to help us understand all this, we have an expert here with us who can hopefully shed some light on everything that's going on.
Happy to try.
So let's jump right in. Why is Greece's population shrinking so rapidly?
Well, there are two main things happening: low birth rates and emigration. When you have fewer babies being born and more people leaving, the population naturally declines.
Makes sense.
But what's really alarming is if you look at the projected age structure of Greece by 2050, it's estimated that 40% of Greeks will be over 65.
Wow.
And that's going to put this immense pressure on the pension and healthcare system.
Yeah, 40%. That's a big part of the population.
Yeah.
You mentioned emigration. Like, was there a specific event that kind of triggered this big movement of people out of Greece?
Well, you have to go back a bit to World War II and the Nazi occupation. I mean, that was just devastating for Greece. You had mass famine, destroyed infrastructure, and they lost like 10% of the entire population.
Wow. Okay, so the country's already reeling from this massive loss. Did things at least stabilize after the war?
Not really. The Greek Civil War started almost immediately after. It lasted for almost 5 years and resulted in even more loss of life and displacement. Yeah. They estimate that over 800,000 people died during that conflict, so you can imagine the social and economic upheaval that
I
caused.
mean, two wars back to back, like
Mhm.
that, I- it's hard to even fathom that impact. So at this point, we're seeing a seriously depleted population just trying to rebuild. Is that when emigration started to become like a major thing?
Yeah, for sure. In the decades following the war, you had around 2 million Greeks emigrating, looking for better opportunities and stability.
Right.
And this drain on the population, especially young and skilled workers, it really hindered the country's ability to bounce back.
It's like a vicious cycle. You lose so many people, and then the people you need to rebuild are the ones who are leaving for better prospects somewhere else.
Exactly. And just as Greece was trying to finally recover from all this historical trauma, it got hit by another crisis in the 2000s, the 2009 Greek debt
Oh,
crisis.
yeah, the debt crisis. I remember all those headlines about like the EU and the IMF stepping in with those massive bailouts. Wasn't there something about the government's reported budget deficit being way higher than they initially said?
Yeah, that's right. It was a huge shock when they revealed that the deficit was actually more than double what they'd reported. This led to the EU and the IMF having to step in with bailouts totaling like 260 billion.
Okay, so Greece avoids this complete financial collapse, but at a cost. I remember hearing about all these strict austerity measures that were put in place. What exactly were those?
Austerity measures were basically these severe spending cuts and tax hikes, all aimed at reducing the government's debt. But they had a devastating impact on the Greek people. Unemployment skyrocketed, reaching 27.5% overall, and like 60% for young people.
60%.
60% for young people. And then you had salaries being slashed and essential services cut back. It created so much desperation and uncertainty.
It's just heartbreaking to think about all those people suffering because of economic policies. Did this trigger like another wave of people leaving Greece?
Absolutely. Over 500,000 skilled workers left the country during this period. And I mean, these were the very people Greece needed to rebuild. It was a brain drain of epic proportions.
So we have war, a debt crisis,
Mhm.
and then this huge exodus of talent. Did things ever let up for Greece?
Well, just as things were starting to kind of stabilize, the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020.
Well, right.
Yeah, and that dealt another blow, particularly to the tourism industry, which is a big part of the Greek economy. Tourism revenue plummeted by 75%.
75%. That's a huge loss.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine losing three-quarters of your income. We hear about all these economic figures, but it's easy to forget that behind those numbers, there are real people, families, and communities struggling to survive.
You're absolutely right. And all this economic hardship that was made even worse by the pandemic has led to another huge issue that Greeks are dealing with today: skyrocketing housing costs.
Oh, yeah, speaking of housing, I read that rent in Thessaloniki has actually surpassed even Athens now. How did that happen?
It's a few things. Limited housing supply, increased demand from all the tourism, and the rise of those short-term rentals have all played a part. But basically, Greeks now have to spend the highest percentage of their disposable income on housing in the entire EU. It's a staggering 35.2% compared to the EU average of 19.7%.
So even if you do manage to find a job in Greece, a huge chunk of your income is going to be eaten up by housing costs.
That's the reality for a lot of Greeks today, and it's contributing to this sense of hopelessness that's driving even more people to consider leaving.
Yeah, it's a bleak picture.
Hmm.
War, economic turmoil, a pandemic, and now a housing crisis. Wow. Let's unpack all the ramifications of these interconnected challenges in part 2 of our deep dive into Greece's uncertain future.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the statistics, but we're talking about real people,
Right.
facing all these challenges. Imagine being a young person in Greece today trying to plan your future.
Yeah, it must feel like an uphill battle all the time.
Mm.
Limited job prospects, those crazy housing costs, this feeling that things might just be better somewhere else. It's a tough decision. Do you stay in your home country with your culture and your family, or leave and try to find better opportunities?
Yeah, you put it perfectly. It's this dilemma so many young Greeks are dealing with. Do they stay and try to build a life in a country facing all these obstacles, or do they join the exodus of skilled workers looking for a more stable future elsewhere?
Right. It makes you think, what happens when a country starts to empty out like that? Is it gradual, or are there like these tipping points where it just becomes really hard to recover?
That's a really complex question. Demographers and economists are studying that really closely. Some argue there's a point of no return where the loss of human capital, especially like skilled workers, reaches this critical mass and it's just too much.
So it's not just about the numbers, it's about the skills and the expertise that are leaving.
Exactly. When skilled workers leave, productivity suffers, innovation slows down, and the economy shrinks even more, making it even less attractive for those who stay.
Yeah, it's like this downward spiral, this slow motion brain drain, where the country's intellectual and creative energy is just disappearing.
Precisely. It's not just about filling jobs, it's about having that vibrant workforce that can drive economic growth and create new opportunities.
So Greece is in this tough spot, burdened by all these historical challenges, the economic turmoil, and this ongoing brain drain. Is there any hope for things to turn around? Can anything be done to reverse these trends?
There's always hope, but it's going to take some bold thinking and some really decisive action from both Greece and its European partners.
So let's talk solutions. What are some concrete steps that could be taken to address these interconnected challenges?
Well, one area that needs immediate attention is the birth rate. They need to find ways to boost the birth rate.
How do you do that?
Well, it could involve providing more financial support to families, expanding access to affordable childcare, and just creating a more family-friendly work environment.
So basically making it easier and more appealing for people to actually have children. But wouldn't that require like a ton of investment, especially with the economy the way it is now?
It absolutely would, but it's an investment in the future. If Greece wants to stop its population from shrinking, it needs to make it easier for young people to start families and feel good about raising kids in their home country.
Yeah, that makes sense. If people don't believe there's a future for their kids in Greece, they're more likely to go somewhere else to find that future. What about the economic side of things? What can be done to create a stronger, more diverse economy that offers people better opportunities?
Greece needs to diversify its economy. I mean, right now it relies heavily on tourism. It needs to find some new industries that offer those high-paying jobs and opportunities for people to move up. This could mean investing in things like renewable energy technology or even like niche sectors where Greece has an advantage.
Right, so finding their new economic niche, a new area of expertise that can drive growth and attract investment. But attracting investment is another challenge, isn't it? Especially with so much economic uncertainty.
It's definitely a hurdle, but it's not impossible. Greece needs to create an environment that's more business-friendly, streamline all the regulations, and really invest in infrastructure and education to attract those foreign investors and support homegrown entrepreneurship.
It sounds like a lot needs to change,
Yeah.
but at least there are some potential paths forward. But what about this massive issue with the pension system? We talked about it earlier, but how can Greece actually fix its pension system, which is already struggling with such an aging population?
The whole system needs to be overhauled. I mean, the current model just isn't sustainable in the long term. There are going to have to be some tough decisions made, things like gradually increasing the retirement age and encouraging people to save more for retirement on their own. It's not going to be popular, but it's critical for the country's long-term stability.
It seems like there's no quick fix, no magic solution to all of Greece's problems. It's going to take this multi-pronged approach, combining demographic, economic, and social reforms.
You're absolutely right. And probably the most important thing is that it's going to take political will, a willingness to make tough choices, even when people are pushing back.
Because the alternative is scary, isn't it? What happens if Greece stays on this path without making these changes?
Well, the most likely scenario is continued decline. Living standards go down, the economy shrinks even more, and young people keep leaving. Greece could end up as a country of empty villages, abandoned factories, and a tiny population that can barely keep basic services running.
That's a grim picture. But it also makes me wonder, are these challenges Greece is facing unique, or are they just a preview of what's to come for other developed nations?
That's what makes Greece's situation so interesting. It's like a warning sign for other countries that are seeing similar demographic trends. Many developed countries are dealing with declining birth rates, people living longer, and a shrinking workforce. Japan, Italy, Spain, Portugal, they're all going through similar things.
So in a way, Greece's experience is a microcosm of what many countries are going to have to deal with in the next few decades. It's not just a Greek problem, it's a global issue that we all need to be paying attention to.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to learn from what's happening in Greece. What lessons can we learn? And how can other countries prepare for a future where there are fewer people to support these growing social and economic needs?
It's a sobering thought, but it also highlights how urgent it is to find solutions. This is about the future of our societies and the kind of world we want to live in. It's about making sure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive no matter where they live. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really makes you think, what kind of future are we headed towards, and what can we do to make it better?
We've always been told that, population growth is this big problem, but as we've seen in Greece, a shrinking population has its own set of challenges, too. We're kind of in uncharted territory here, and it requires us to think differently.
Yeah, it's like we're sailing into a new era, but we don't have a map. But every challenge also comes with opportunities, right? What kind of opportunities do you see coming out of this whole demographic shift?
Well, when you have a shrinking population, it forces you to kind of reevaluate what's important and become more resourceful. You can't just rely on constant growth to solve your problems anymore. You have to become more efficient, more sustainable, and really focus on quality over quantity.
So it's like a forced reset, a chance to redefine what really matters and find some new solutions.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. We have to find ways to do more with less, whether that's in healthcare, transportation, energy, or even food production. And that creates a space for real innovation and creative problem solving.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Do you think this could lead to some positive social changes too?
It could. In a world with fewer people, you might see a bigger emphasis on community and collaboration. We'll have to rely on each other more, share resources, and support people who are struggling. And maybe that could lead to stronger social bonds and a sense of shared responsibility.
It's an interesting thought. A smaller world could lead to a more connected and compassionate world. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Greece's uncertain future, what are the key things our listeners should take away from all of this?
Well, the first thing is that this isn't just a Greek problem. This is happening all over the world, and we all need to be paying attention. We need to start talking openly about the challenges and the opportunities that come with an aging world and start brainstorming solutions.
And as we've seen today, these changes in population affect everything. Our economies, our social structures, everything. The decisions we make now are going to shape the world we leave for future generations.
Exactly. We've kind of laid out all the pieces of the puzzle. Now it's up to each of us to figure out how to put it all together. Do your own research, think about different perspectives, and talk about it with other people. There's no easy answer, but it's a conversation we all need to be having.
We encourage all of you to look into this more, explore the different angles, and challenge your own assumptions. Maybe by understanding what's happening in Greece, we can be better prepared for the challenges and take advantage of the opportunities that are coming our way.
Remember, the future isn't set in stone. It's something we create through the choices we make and the things we do.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope we've sparked your curiosity and gotten you thinking about the world in new ways. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.